Our Métis brothers and sisters, we haven't left you out. We're inviting Elder Ken Pruden, who was born in Tinto, Manitoba, and his ancestral background is Métis, English, Cree, French. Ken is a past chair elder for the Vancouver Métis Community Association and past elder for the Vancouver Aboriginal Transformative Justice Canada. Ken served 26 years in the RCAF throughout Canada and 3 years at 2F Wing in northern France. Currently works for the National Tour Board of Canada and as elder and as cultural advisor for Fort Langley National Historic Site of Canada. Ken resides in Aldergrove, BC with his wife Sandra and has 2 children and 7 grandchildren. Let's hear it for Ken Pruden.
Thank you. And say, hello in the Michif language of the Métis people. I first want to acknowledge and thank the Coast Salish peoples and peoples of the land for allowing me to speak in their territory. I'm very grateful to be here today. Give you a little bit of an outline of the Métis people. We've had a very checkered history. If you'd like to know where we originated, it's the criteria that is required for us right now is the same as we have to self-identify. We have to say them. We have to be distinct or different from the nations in the Inuit, which there are. We have to be able to trace North American ancestry somewhere in our history. We have to be accepted by a Métis community. You know, most of the associations across Canada have the same criteria approximately. But Section 35 of the Constitution of 1982 does recognize us as one of the 3 Indigenous peoples of the country. And we fought for our rights and began. And where we originated, let's look at two major fur companies. First one is the Hudson Bay Company, which most of you, I'm sure, are aware of. They second in 1670. King Charles II of England, Whitehall Palace, England, awarded a grant to his favorite cousin, Prince Rupert. The grant he awarded him was all the land of all the water, headwaters of all the waters draining to Hudson Bay. Because of that area is called Rupert's Land. Now that was approximately 1.5 million square miles. 40% of Canada, plus a lot of Minnesota and North Dakota. But guess whose land that was that he was taking away? So, and the same thing happened in the States when Napoleon Bonaparte sold the Louisiana Purchase to the Americans. So you people are pretty lucky. You've got agents working for you all over the world. Right? But what happened was the Hudson Bay, when they set up, they came over and they set up York Factory on the south shore of the beach, north there. That was the Tidewater export. And then they moved out on the river, set a few more ports up, and they put traders in them, and then they waited for the Indigenous people to bring the furs to them. They had a monopoly on the fur trade, and that went on for a number of years. Then in 1783, a couple of enterprising Highlanders from Scotland, Jim McGill and Simon McTavish, decided to set up a competing fur company in Montreal, Quebec. They set up what they called the Northwest Company. Only they operate a little bit different in the Hudson Bay. They sent their men out in canoes to pick up the furs from the indigenous community all over the country. So guess what happened? If you have a product and you're getting rid of it, would you rather have it 500 miles to sell it, or have somebody pick it up at the front door? So within a few decades, the Northwest Company controls 78% of the fur trade. Now, what happened with these two fur trade companies? When they first came here, their men were discouraged from any relationships with Indigenous women. In fact, one of the reasons they wanted God, our very existence was against the laws of God. But so, you know, as nature takes its course, some of the men formed relationships. Then the companies found out something unusual. If a trader married a woman, all of a sudden he had somebody that knew how to tan hides, make clothes, survive in the wilderness, act as a guide, interpreter. Well, they started to and the marriages were according to the fashion of the country. They weren't religion or anything else. Their partners and our peaceful life. Children that developed from those relations were the first, considered among the first Canadians, born in Canada, that were neither Indigenous nor Caucasian. That's what they coined the word half-breed, for the 50-50. So as things happened, the traders found out it was there. They set up a shelter halfway between the van and forth. They traveled back and forth. Of course, the children picked up both languages, customs from both groups. They began to develop their own. Like when I was stationed in France, Germany, the little children would go out playing. They would come in speaking the language and the parents didn't understand. That's what happened with Metis. They used a little whichever band they happened to be with, threw in some English. Sorry about that. Better here? Oh, I put my flag on top of it. I'm sorry. That's good planning, you see. Anyway, as I was saying, what they did was they picked up little bits of both languages and French and English, and they mixed them all together, and they came up with a language called Bitchif. Bitchif or Bunji, depending which area you were in. And so they developed their own language. Then they developed their own music because they had the drumming from the Indigenous peoples, they had the different music from the Caucasian people, and they developed the violin. And you've probably all heard the Métis jigging. Okay? They said if a Métis had a fiddle, he didn't need sleep. Because after work all day, they'd bring out their fiddles and they would jig. So as we became more numerous and developed our own sort of culture, these companies realized that, you know what, these people would be good workload. Governor Simpson said of our people, he said, if we bring them into the service at an early age, they will become good and steady men. And all things considered, they will probably be the cheapest and best servants we can get. And that's what they used us for. We were servants for the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company. And we seldom moved up. They held us down. And as a result of our relationship with the Indigenous people, we learned well how to handle canoes. Okay? And I'm sure that most of you have been in a canoe or you know what a canoe is. Okay? Birch skin over a cedar frame with spruce and ash ribs and sewed together with spruce, filled with pitch off the spruce tree. And probably a lot of you have done this too, but when we were children, we couldn't afford to buy gum like, you know, the good people. So we chewed the spruce gum. That's what we called it. It's very bitter when you start chewing it, but after a while it gets to the same consistency as gum. So you have all these things you pick up, and we picked up this canoe. So our people became really expert at handling canoes, okay? Because they traveled around, they were buffalo hunters, they moved a lot around the country, they got to know the country. They picked up different dialects. A lot of them spoke many dialects. So the fur traders quickly realized that, you know, if we want somebody to guide us out on a trip, people are good guides. Because they know the country, they know the dialects. They're interpreters, they can become mediators. So that's what they started using our people for. And when they paddled the canoes, a freight canoe was 36 to 40 feet long. Okay? It weighed 300 pounds dry and 600 pounds wet. Every package in the canoe weighed 90 pounds. Every man that was paddling had to be no taller than 5'8". Most were 5'5", 5'6", my height. And the paddles were 9-foot long red cedar. And they paddled from daylight to dark every day. Okay? They paddled 55 minutes, then they had a 5-minute pipe break. So if you ask them how far it is from one place to another, they tell you this many pipes. Didn't travel in kilometers or miles, everything was by pipe. And every man at every portage had to carry a minimum of 2 packages. That's 180 pounds. He not only had to carry it, he had to run with it. It was a time factor. If you could carry 3, that's 270 pounds. They gave him a Spanish silver dollar. These men paddled the canoes from Lachine, Quebec to the Mackenzie River, 4,300 miles. Across 60 lakes, and they did 300 portages. This is why a lot of them didn't have very long lives. They were quite exciting, okay? But they had their problems, you know, with health and things like that. So the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company used us like that for many, many years. And then we started to get a little irritated at that. We wanted to be free because we were buffalo hunters and we had to run the buffalo for them. And, you know, you say a buffalo hunter, you think of a couple of guys taking a gun and going out buffalo, right? But when we went on a buffalo hunt, there was 400 to 600 hunters. There was 500 or 600 women. There was 400 or 500 children. Why would you take children on a buffalo hunt? That's pretty dangerous, right? And you got a bunch of kids on a buffalo hunt. But in our culture, everybody has a job from the time you can walk, and probably in yours too. And so during the hunt, the older children had to go around and gather up fuel for the fires later on. And the younger children had to keep the dogs away from the meat. Okay? And then in Saskatchewan and places like that where there was no trees and stuff, their job was to gather buffalo chips, buffalo dung, and that's what they used for fuel, cook their food. Okay? And every part of the buffalo was used. There wasn't anything wasted. The stomach was a water bag, poured into a cup. The tail was a fly swatter. The hide, of course, built our shelters and made our clothing. Okay, the hoofs could be boiled up and make glue. And we're very, very inventive at utilizing animals like this. So I'm just going to, I made an outline here so I wouldn't go over my time. But to show you what, when they mentioned servants, a 3-year contract for us, they were paid 8 British pounds at the beginning of the contract, and up to 15 pounds by the end of the 3 years, depending on their experience and whatnot. They were given 2 blankets, 2 shirts, 2 pair of trousers, 2 handkerchiefs, and 14 pounds of tobacco depending on rank and experience. That was a 3-year contract with them. And the company encouraged them to use the company stores when they were on the trail. So usually by the time they returned, they not only didn't have any money, they were in debt for the company, so they had to go back out, right? So the company built themselves a steady labor pool with our people. So then we decided, well, you know what, this is so good, we should be able to trade our furs anyway. So there was a fellow by the name of Cuthbert Grant, and he was a very good leader. And most of you have probably heard of Pemmican, right? Pemmican is made of buffalo meat. They use other meats, but usually buffalo. And the meat is dried, powdered to a powder, and the 50 pounds of meat, they added 40 pounds of fat. And then some berries and that to give it flavor. And then they put it into a hide bag called a toro or a parflet. They sealed the bag with pitch. When they sealed that bag, that food kept for years. No refrigeration, no nothing. The air couldn't get at it. It kept for years. So that was the prime food of the fur trade because they traveled all the time, right? And would have been good food for an army. And you could eat it 3 ways. You could eat it raw. You could fry it in its own fat and add some things to it and make a meal called russo. Or you could make a stew called rubaboo. So, big thing for these fur companies was to keep a good supply of pemmican. And then along came this governor of Fort Garry when they set Fort Garry up, and he put out a pemmican proclamation and said, you can't take pemmican out of the Red River area. So that's sort of irritated the Northwest Company because they traveled all the time. So they liberated a load of pemmican. And Cuthbert Grant and 15 Métis were taking it to Lake Winnipeg for the Northwest Company. Governor Semple saw them passing Fort Garry, and he said, I'm going to go out and arrest those guys. I'll show them this guy. So he asked for volunteers, and he got 24 men. They marched out, and they stopped the Métis at a place called Seven Oaks. And the story goes that Cuthbert Grant sent 2 of his men up to talk to Semple, and Semple and one of his men went up to talk to him. They got into an argument. Semple's men had some guns that didn't work. They weren't well experienced. They thought it was a gold horn, didn't they? And apparently one of Cuthbert's men called the governor a scoundrel, and he didn't like to be called a scoundrel, so he grabbed at the man's horse or his rifle. Somebody fired a shot. The battle began. It only lasted 15 minutes, but Semple and 20 of his men were killed. Only 2 Métis. And that was the Métis ordeal under fire, and then they said, okay, now we're effective. From now on, we run the buffalo what we want, sell our furs where we want. Okay? And so they charged ahead. And a lot of you have probably heard of Louie Rio. Okay? Now, Louie Rio was born in St. Patel in the Red River Settlement. And at a young age, he was sent by Bishop Taché to Montreal for education. And he worked well in the university. He was doing very good up until for a few years, and then his father died. That put him into such a depression that he came down, he started failing, and eventually he finally left the university. And then he tried to work with the Grey Nuns. And he worked there for a little while, but he kept going down, and finally he had to leave there. And when he was 25 years old, he came back to the Red River just when trouble was starting. John Bruce and a group of Métis had taken over Fort Garry. And they kicked the governor out, and they formed a provisional government. So when Louie Rio came back, he was well educated compared to most of them, so he was elected secretary. And about a year later, John Bruce resigned, and Louie was elected the governor and the president of the Métis Association. Okay? So what he did was he formed a provisional government. He had 20 English and 20 French. And they drafted what was called a Rupert's Land Bill of Rights. And it was thought to be the fairest bill ever drafted, with the exception of one thing. Everybody liked it, except the Canadians. The reason the Canadians didn't like it, item 7 said, Canada guarantees to hook us to the nearest railroad within 5 years of becoming part of the Confederation. And Prime Minister MacDonald looked at that and he realized the nearest railroad was in the United States. If they hooked Fort Garry up to the United States, the Americans would walk in and take over Manitoba. So he didn't like that. But there was a man in there that was causing problems by the name of Thomas Scott. And he kept causing problems, so they tried him under the rules of buffalo hunt. They found him guilty, and they executed him. And that was the big mistake, because that gave Prime Minister MacDonald use he needed to send the army out to arrest Riel for capital murder. But people said, just a minute, that provisional government wasn't legal. Well, what happened was, Prime Minister MacDonald heard about the problems in the Red River. So what he did was, he put a stop payment on the check. He was going to buy Rupert's land from Hudson Bay for Canada. He put a stop payment, and he sent a message to the governor saying, don't read the proclamation that says we own Canada, because I'm not paying it. The governor was over in the States, and Donald didn't know. He didn't get the message. So he stepped across the border in the middle of the night in a snowstorm, forged a letter from Queen Victoria, and read the proclamation saying that Canada now owned Manitoba. Well, Hudson Bay gave up all ownership of Rupert's land as soon as he did that, because they thought they'd sold it to Canada. Canada didn't accept any responsibility because they didn't pay for it. Now anarchy exists, and according to the law of nations, if anarchy exists, people in the area are entitled to form a provisional government for protection. So the minute they did that, Riel's government was legal. But with the army coming out, Riel escaped to the States. He knew they couldn't fight the army, so he escaped to the States with other men, and then Archibald offered him $1,000 to stay there for 5 years. And he did. Stayed there for 5 years to teach school in Montana. Most of our people who were persecuted there moved west after that. They situated around Batoche and areas in that area. And then the same thing started to happen. Canadians started moving out. They wanted to survey the farms into squares, and you see the Métis have always been sharing people. Seems they learned from a certain people that Mother Earth is not for ownership. Mother Earth is a resource. There. When they set their farms up, they had a half mile on the water, so everybody had water. 2 miles back for farm land. Wood lot at the back for building houses and fuel, and a common pasture, the stock. Everybody shared, but Canada wanted to make nice little square lots. All right. When they sent surveyors out, Riel stood on the chains and wouldn't let them survey. So as it happened, they said, okay, they went to Montana and they asked Riel if he could come back and lead them. He agreed to. He came back and he started writing letters to the government, and he wrote letters for a year. Then the government said, well, we'll do a census. After a year of writing letters, they were going to count heads. That's when Gabriel Dumont, who was lieutenant, that's enough, we're going to fight. So they did. And Dumont actually beat Northwest Mounted Police at Buck Lake. He met the Canadians again at Fish Creek and told them to withdraw, and they considered that a win. And then there was 8,000 Canadians and 350 Métis. They held them for 4.5 days. The oldest man killed in that battle was Boise Olette. He was either 93 or 96 fighting in that battle. And when they came out of the trenches to fight hand to hand, found out that many of them were 14 and 15-year-old children. But Gabriel Dumont, being good in the bush when they lost the battle, he escaped to the United States. He joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, the sharpshooter. But Louie Rio thought that if he stayed in Canada and even if he was caught, the publicity would actually help Métis people. He didn't expect to get executed. So he was captured and he was on his way to Winnipeg to be tried, and Prime Minister Donald found out, and he knew there were so many Métis in Winnipeg that if Louie Rio got there, they'd never convict him. So he stopped them and he sent them back to resign. Now there were 72 people tried in Bill's trial. 71 of them were tried under the North American Act. The maximum penalty was life in prison. Riel had 3 charges added to his charges under a 1315 Act that was only valid in the British Isles. Those charges were high treason against the Queen. And the penalty for that was death. Now, when Riel was tried, they sent the lawyers from Montreal to represent him. And the lawyers wanted him to plead insanity. He didn't want to be remembered as an insane person, so he asked to speak in his own view. He was so eloquent to prove beyond a doubt he was not insane. Because he was not insane, he was convicted of high treason against the Queen. On the 16th of November, 1885, he was hanged in his body. His body was sent back to his mother and sister. Today, but he's recognized as the founder of Manitoba, the father of Confederation. So he finally got recognized after all these years. Gabriel Dumont stayed in the United States for many, many years. Pardon. He actually came back and went to Montreal and couldn't write. He spoke 6 languages. He dictated his memoirs and had his memoirs, and he's buried in the top. Only thing marking his grave is a big man-sized slab of rock. Doing here. Now, you may have heard of the Infinity flag. This is the Métis flag. It's called the Infinity flag. The oldest Indigenous flag in Canada. Leads the maple leaf by 160 years. The symbol indicates joining together of 2 great nations. Because it's infinity, it signifies that the nation will go on forever. And the equal side, so the balance between man and woman. And it's not without controversy like most of our lives. There's another version, and it's red and white. And my choker, like this. Now, the first mention of the flag says that Hudson Bay Company was given to him by the Northwest Company before the Battle of Seven Oaks. It was red and white. Still people that didn't care about it. But the flag book of the Métis says that nobody knows for sure. What they believe is that if you look at the British Army uniform in those days, it's red and white. Union Jack is red, white, blue. So they say, and red and white is the Hudson Bay color. So they say that the red and white was the Hudson Bay flag. Now the blue and white most closely resembles the St. Andrew's blue and white flag of Scotland. And there's 2 Scottish colors that originated Northwest Company. So blue and white was the colors of the Northwest. They suspect that the blue and white was the Northwest Company, and the red and white was the Hudson Bay Company flags. So I'm going to run out of time here if I don't move on pretty quick. because Métis nations, like I say, all through history, gatherers, and the Métis women excelled at beadwork. They, if you look at my lady, see the flowers on them. We called us the power beadwork people. Okay? And most of the indigenous beading, if I should have brought my medicine bag up, but my niece, who's Cree, made that bag for me. And if you look at most indigenous beading, it's symmetrical in design. That's how you can usually tell the difference between Métis and indigenous people. And you see the Métis women at the first, they were the first ones to have access to the glass bead from the Caucasian people. Then after they got the glass beads and started doing it, and the indigenous people, they got glass beads from the Métis. Started doing it. Okay, but there was many descriptives of our culture. You know, one of the politicians said, "These people are all politicians, but of a very peculiar creed, where they cordially detest all civilized laws of man, believing implicitly that everyone was born to be free." That was our problem. The Métis believed that nobody could tell them what to do because they were born to be free. You know? And they were great storytellers. Most of the famous guides had Métis, most of the famous explorers had Métis guides and interpreters. If you go to Fort Langley in the cultural room, there's banners hanging there telling you about the people that developed British Columbia. And there's one there that says David Thompson discovered the Thompson River, right? And if you look below it, it says Jacko Finlay and his family blazed a trail through Howe's Pass and led David Thompson to the river. Okay? And this was common all through the exploration of North America. The people did the guiding and locating, and the traders took the credit. And their stories were like when Simon Fraser found out he had to go through the Fraser Canyon. Métis told him, "Listen, them cliffs are so steep, you have to hang on with your eyebrows." Okay? And they told him about the canoes in rough water. That canoe was so unstable, you had to hold your tongue in the center of the roof of your mouth, or it would tip over. Okay? So our people became very good. My own father was muskrat trapper. And he used to bring home the skins on a stretching board, you know. They were all nice and clean, and we, you know, we used to look at them and say, "How did you get those skins like that?" I said, "Oh, it's easy." I said, "I just carry them traps around just to show people. You don't these traps." I said, "I sit by the water, and when one of them big wicked muskrats come up to eat me, I said, when they open their mouth to swallow me, I reach in and grab them by the tip of the tail and pull them inside out." And he said, and then they're running away, right? But as they're running, now their insides are on the outside. So as they're running away, all the insides fall off. And all he has to do is go over and pick up the skin and put it on a stretcher. So you see, there's methods to how you can do these things. And the Métis were always great at doing that, you know. And this jigging you hear about, they used to have jigging contests. See who could wear their moccasins out first, whose legs cramped up first. And in them days, a lot of the habitats had dirt floors. And when they started jigging, the dust came up and they had to take turns going outside and get a few breaths of fresh air before they could come in and keep on jigging. Okay? And they were very inventive in the equipment they used. You've probably heard of the Red River cart. Red River cart was a wooden wagon. There's no nails, no glue, no nothing. It's pegged and fitted together. And it carried from 400 to 1,000 pounds. It was usually pulled by an oxen or a horse. Okay? And the wheels were about 6 or 7 feet high. And they were dish shaped. Now, they came to a river or a stream, they just took the wheels off, put a buffalo hide on them, put them on the bottom of the wagon and floated it. Wheels were high so they could go over all the rocks and bumps buried. And it's dry wood on dry wood. They couldn't use grease because it would have picked up dirt and dust and jammed the wheel. So they said it sounded like 1,000 cats scratching their nails on a blackboard. Okay? And that's why I always get a kick out of these Western movies. You see the scout that sneaks the wagon train past the First Nation. You could hear us coming for 7.5 miles. And how many people have been to Winnipeg? On Portage Avenue? It's the widest street in the country. You know why it's the widest street in the country? Well, when the Métis moved their carts, they traveled in wagon and trains of over 100, maybe 200 or 300 carts. What they did was they tied the halter of one oxen, the right rear of the other. But one driver or one walker could lead 5 carts. Portage Avenue started out as a bit of a cart train. At one time, it could accommodate 20 cars. When they put the road in, they left us not it. But you see how these things develop? To use them like that, and the Métis were very, very good. That wagon resembled the two-wheel charrettes of Quebec or the Scottish ones. And they used them up until actually fairly recently. There's a model of one in the cultural center at Fort Langley. The other thing they had was the York boat. The York boat was called the Impossible Boat. And the reason it was called the Impossible Boat, they went to the boatman and said, okay, here's what we want. The canoes don't carry on. We need a boat that's got to have a flat bottom so it can, shallow draft so it can go in shallow water. It's got to carry a great big payload, lots of freight. It's got to travel under sail and oar. And it's got to be really strong to bounce off rocks and things like that. And they looked at them and said, that's impossible. A couple of Métis Yorkmen got together and they built that boat. There's a full-size replica in Fort Langley also. Now that boat, the biggest one, was about 42 feet long and went up to 14,000 pounds. And they actually portaged that boat through the bush. One of the traders said that was the hardest labor he had ever seen any human being do, because they called it tripping. When they came to rapids, half the crew would stay in the boat. Now this boat, there's an example. Great Canoe had a crew of 12 people. Bowman, steersman, and 10 paddlers. York boat had a crew of 10 people. Bowman, steersman, and 8 paddlers. The oars were 15 feet long. And every stroke the man took, he had to stand up and fall back. If he miscued, the oar took him into the water, crushed his ribs, and down. When they were tripping, half the crew stayed in the boat, the other half got out on the riverbank, and you know what a riverbank's like. They tied themselves to the boat, and they crawled along the riverbank and pulled the boat through the rapids. And if the boat got picked up and swept away, they were all killed and the boat was smashed up on them. When they transported it through the bush, got log rollers, put the boat on the log rollers and pulled it over the log rollers through the bush. So this is the kind of labor that they were subject to. And the Métis, like I say, everybody had a job, everybody had to work, even the little children, you know. And they progressed through like that. They got their own independence. And today they're relatively independent, but they're still facing discrimination. For example, we're recognized as, well, they said we're recognized as Indians. We're recognized as a nation. So we would think we would have the same rights. But the Métis, like I say, everybody had a job, everybody had to work, even the little children, you know. And they got their own independence. And today they're relatively independent, but they're still facing discrimination. For example, we're recognized as, well, they said we're recognized as Indians. We're recognized as a nation. So we would think we would have the same rights. but we don't get any of the same rights that the First 60 scoop, for example. A lot of the First Nations are still waiting for money from that. A lot of your children. Well, our people went through it too, and the residents. But they haven't given us anything yet. We're in court fighting to justify why we're entitled. So this is the thing that is fixed all. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of where we are now. The Commissioner Paul Chartrand, he's the one who said that we're a living bridge between two cultures. And the bridge has to be prepared to be walked on by both sides. That's where we stood. So today, Bryce Paget, he founded the Métis Nation of Canada in 2009. It merged with the Council of the First Métis People of Canada in 2018. Now they have the National Chief is Carol Dumont, Deputy Chief Bill Gabani, Lead Elders Donald McFarler and Doris Johnson. They have a Métis Rights Admin and Technology, Leaders of Circles and Societies, Métis Nation Ambassador, treaties, alliances, communities, and Métis leaders. That's what represents nationally. Now, the Métis Nation of Manitoba, of which I'm a member, they have President David Chartrand, and they've got youth, citizenship, harvesters, health, wellness, employment, all the similar ministries that Canada has. And in 2018, 2019, they serviced 2,796 clients. 960s were employed. 914 went back to school in education. When you come to British Columbia, we've got two groups here that say they represent the BC. Métis Nation BC and the BC Métis Federation. They both have all the ministries, and they both work with the people, and they're both doing a good job at representing us. And there's a Métis homeland in BC at Tully Lake, 76 kilometers from south of Dawson Creek. Migrated from Pine Trot, Alberta, and they're recognized as homeland. And a homeland is where a Métis person these days has to be able to trace their historic back to a homeland in order to be considered a Métis. Okay? And here's an example. If you apply for any of the applications of any of the organizations, that's a 5-generation chart. That's mine. So I had to go 5 generations back, and they're asked to provide the long form birth certificate first on the chart, which of course these days is possible. A lot of the churches are burning. But still, you get a birth certificate. They'll come and say I'm Métis. I'll say, well, what makes you that? Well, one of the foster homes. And they have to dig up this kind of it's very difficult to be able to do that. And in British Columbia, the Justice Institute has Métis teachers. Fort Langley's a cultural center. It's got a Métis room in it. All across the country, there's demonstrations and everything of Métis culture. And in BC alone, like Joseph McKay, he founded Nanaimo. Really, Conley Douglas was the first Lady of British Columbia. Douglas's wife, and she saved his life up at Fort St. James. And Josette Leglace, she's the wife of John Worth, who was the chief factor of the Hudson Bay, member of the Legislative Assembly, and the largest landowner on Vancouver Island. Isabella Ross was the first female landowner in British Columbia. Jane Klein MacDonald was the leading lady of Fort Langley. Simon Fraser Tolmie was the BC Premier between 1925 and 1930. And the Victorian Volunteers formed in 1851 and disbanded in 1850. First police force, the military force, they were made names are on bricks, Governor Square, and Victoria. And all the people I mentioned there were identified. So they did move up into the, more education, more power and control, and things like that. Now, I just want to close with a quote from Louie Rio. It says here, this is an order in council, number 0697, dated 26th of May, 1983, British Columbia. Great Métis icon Louie Rio had this to say about the Métis and the word itself. French word Métis is derived from the Latin participle mixtus, which means mixed, French mêlé. It expresses well the idea that it sought to be conveyed. However appropriate the corresponding English expression half-breed might have been for the first generation of the mixture of blood, now that European blood and Indian blood are mixed in every degree, it is no longer generally applicable. French word Métis expresses well the idea of this mixture in the most satisfactory manner possible, and thus becomes a suitable name for our race. Why should we care to what degree exactly of mixture we possess European and Indian blood? No matter little we have of one or the other, do not both the gratitude and filial love require us to make a point of saying, we are the Métis?
Well, my background, I'm French, English, and Cree. Okay. Now there are a group of people in Manitoba that believe the only true Métis are the French Cree from the Red River, which means that I'm from the Red River. So I can legally go around and say, hey, I'm a Métis, but am I going to go to Saskatchewan and say, oh, sorry, buddy, you're French Cree in Saskatchewan, you're not a Métis? And what has happened recently is that, just like you say, because of the people allowing Métis people to claim status, in the beginning, the Métis homeland consisted of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. For some reason, it didn't include Quebec. And we're supposed to be descended from the Voyageurs and the Courrier de Bois from Quebec. And that's where the Northwest Company originated. But Manitoba has decided apparently that Ontario was letting too many people in, claiming Métis status that weren't really Métis. So now they've been excluded from the Métis homeland. So I have my problem with that is, how do you take a whole province full of people that were Métis one day and tell them the next day they're not? And you know, there is a good argument. If you say French, English, Cree, there's a genealogist by the name of Elman that has put out an article that says he discovered Métis in Labrador and New Brunswick. And he's got the names of the French captains that cohabited with the Indigenous women. He's got the names of their children that are located all over the place. But I have sent in information from people inside that asked me to get them their status. And I've sent it in to the Métis Nation BC. And with 10 years of genealogy from Nova Scotia, Mi'kmaq, and it's been sent back saying you're not a Métis, you're from back east. So it's very ambiguous. The people, and there's another thing. There's two groups in BC saying they represent the Métis. Métis Nation BC and the BC Métis Federation. BC Métis Federation recognized the homeland of BC. You know, eastern part of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and northwestern part of Ontario. The BC Métis Federation signed a memorandum of understanding with New Brunswick. So they apparently recognize Métis all across the country, right? And this is two groups in the province. Wow. So, you know, we have to be careful because there are a lot of people, because I'm just like with your people, when we were recognized as Indians, my phone started ringing off the hook. And I'd pick it up and I'd say, how do I get my Métis card? And I would say, well, what do you want the card for? You're going to hunt? You're going to do what? you want? No, we're gonna get reservations, we're gonna get money, we're gonna get this and that. And I'd say no, and they'd say click. You know, so these are the people you have to watch out for, right? There's the same people, and I'll tell you another thing. Have any of you ever heard of Grey Owl? Yeah. He was a very famous conservationist and poet. He's in Ontario, Grey Owl. And he spoke the language. He actually went to Great Britain dressed in native regalia and spoke to royalty about protecting the natives and all that stuff. He was born and raised in England. He never left England until he was 17 years old. No indigenous blood whatsoever. Okay. Came over here and learned the life and is recognized as a great indigenous conservationist. He was a great conservationist. But if you're going to recognize him as a Quebec Métis, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, that's so interesting how those of us that, I'm not saying me, but a lot of our people are trying to get their status, and like everyone knows their parents are this and that,
Yeah.
but they can't get that status or aren't recognized. Well, so many other people, just because they have the right words and the right lawyers and, you know, they have no rights to it, but they want the rights that we have or the funding sources.
Yeah.
If they know how to get in there, it's kind of maddening. And again, goes back to that divide and conquer, conquer situation.
That's exactly what the Métis is facing. You see, you have people showing up and you know, like I've had people say, I'd say, well, why do you think you're a Métis? Well, one of the foster homes I was in, one of the people told me she thought I looked like a native. Or one of my relatives looked like a native. Well, you know, maybe they are. But you have to get the documentation to be able to prove, which is only fair, to be able to prove that you're what you say you are. You see? Because now the Métis do have hunting rights. The Métis in Winnipeg were awarded all the land Winnipeg sits on. And they got the money for it. And they're using that money to further educate the people and you know, try and get rid of the drugs and alcohol on the reserves and in the different slum areas and things like that. And that's what we need to do, because this is not part of it, but I'll tell you, I worked in the federal prisons for 12 years, and that's where the Indigenous people learn their culture, unfortunately. And they used to say to me, Ken, it's too late for me, but you have to get the kids. And they're right. But I always told them it's never too late. It's not. You can, and a lot of them turned around. But that's where we have to start, is with the children. Okay?
So I have an online, it's a little long. So from Muriel Gonville, the difference was there was an ethnogenesis, and we have our own culture, and you either belong to it or you don't. Pretend Indians have no actual ties to our homelands or our identity. It's not our duty to coddle confused people that think they are Métis because they don't understand that we are our own people and nation, and are looking to belong somewhere. And people with some distant Indigenous ancestor, even less. They are white people longing for our culture, plain and simple.
And that's correct. That's correct, because I went to get my driver's license renewed, and I walked in and the woman talking to me said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm retired, but I work, you know, with Indigenous people in the prisons and that. I said, well, how do you do that? I said, well, I'm a Métis elder, and she said, oh, how do I get my card? And I said, well, what part of Indigenous ancestry do you have? She said, oh, none. I don't have it, but that's a really nice card. I would really like to get one. So, you know, and what the lady's saying, that's why they insist that you have to be able to trace your ancestry to a homeland. Much like in your case where, you know, somebody needs to come from your country before they can say they're one of you, right? And we have to go to a homeland, you know, and right now with the homeland, where the homeland is designated, the East is not part of it. So it's still, you know, I still find it hard to understand how Quebec is not part, you know, because that's where it originated. But if that's the decision of the governing body, then that's the way it should be. You know? So that's why I'm going to ask which one of you guys is going to adopt me so I can get rights. Okay? It's, but that's what, unfortunately, that's what a lot of people look at is they're looking to get benefits, you know. And I guess you can't blame them in a way. And a lot of them are, I know a lot of them that are definitely are Métis, but they'll never be able to prove it because there is no records. And even where they come from, you know, if you say to somebody, well, where's your parents? Well, I think my mother's in, might be in Dawson Creek, and I think my father's in New Brunswick, you know. And if they don't even know for sure where their parents are, how can you ever trace anything? So, you know, it's just unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
Yeah.
You see?
That's
You see, that's where, like, in my, what they did with us when they were starting, I showed you the 5-generation chart, but right behind it, that's an application for script from one of my relatives. That's the only thing that prevents me from being status, because this relative applied for script and received it. And the script was a piece of paper they gave to the people saying, this is worth 640 acres, this is worth 320 acres. And the people didn't know what it was. So speculators came out and said, well, I'll give you $50 for that piece of paper. And of course, the people didn't know any better, so they said, sure. And the speculators became millionaires, and the people became paupers. And they ended up they called road allowance people. That's the only place they could get to set up their shacks. Rooster Town in Winnipeg, you know, about 600 people. They were all very poor, but they all stuck together, and they all had their parties and their jigging and their dances, and they all supported each other. And that's the story of our people. We're people of the land, come from the land, we work together, and we play together. The Hudson Bay Company, to my knowledge, has not reimbursed the people. There was a lot of them that worked for them for a very long time. And when they retired, at first, to help them out, when they retired, they were usually given maybe a farm homesteader or something to help them in their retirement. But they didn't do any formal thing, to my knowledge, as far as giving them pensions or things like that, you know. And I don't know, the Hudson Bay Company now has been sold to the United States, so it really doesn't exist much out here anymore, so I don't think there's any way that anybody can apply to them for assistance. You could try it, I guess, but I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah, it's like Future Shop. You have a card for Future Shop. I had like $75 left, but then they closed out. I can't use my card.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one little right after this, but you wanted to know about the script. The script, as far as I'm aware, the majority of the people that got control of the script, they took it, used it, and they owned the land, and they developed the land, okay? Those people that kept the script, there are some people today that have tried to take it through the court. I'm not aware of any that have succeeded, but most of it just disappeared. You know, it's put into old papers and forgotten about. If you have some, I would suggest that what you do is talk to a lawyer and ask him if he can trace where that came from and what it's worth, because it should be honored. It should be honored. If you were given 620 acres, it should be honored. But you were talking about how they did that. Does anybody ever go to the casino?
Not me.
Eh? Okay. When you first went to the casino, they gave you points, right?
Yeah.
And you could take these points when you were leaving the casino and you could cash them in and get your money and go home, right? And then they brought out a rule that said, well, you really can't cash them in anymore. You gotta leave them in the machine and play the machine. And everybody said, yeah, that's okay. And then, I don't think many people noticed it, but if you won a prize using your points, they deducted from the prize the amount of the points you used. So what they did was give you nothing, right? They gave you one hand, they took it away with the other. And in Langley, they had a big electronic sign that said, we give 10% back to the community every month. And one month they had $1.3 million up there. They gave back to the community. Pretty good, eh? That means they took 13 million out of the community. But who thinks that? So I got a deal for the government. If they give me $1 million a year for the next 10 years, I will guarantee them I'll give $100,000 every year to their charity of their choice. Okay? So they'll get $1.2 million for nothing. All they have to do is give me $1 million a year for 12 years. Fair deal, isn't it? Anyway.
So, any closing remarks to your Métis community? They're all listening online.
Oh, the Métis community is listening.
Yeah.
I got caught.
Well, all my friends and the community, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of them wanted to say specifically Marcy to you.
I'm sorry?
Lynn Harisi said, please thank Elder Ken by saying Marcy.
Oh, mercy, that's thank you. In Michif, or French, eh? It's the same as, I'll tell you what, I was, when I was starting out, and I don't speak Michif, so I went to a Michif teacher and I said, I want you to write me out a statement that I can say, thanking people and introducing myself. So she wrote this statement out for me. And it is Tansei, which means hello. Namiaho tino ta, kaya mehe tan, which means I'm grateful to be speaking here, you know. And so I thought, boy, I'm getting pretty good here. She had me say it a couple of times, and there was an elderly Métis elder that spoke the language fluently. And so I thought, boy, I'm going to impress her. So I was talking to her on the phone, and I said, hey, listen to this. And I said it, and she broke out laughing. And she laughed and laughed, and I thought, my God, maybe that woman put something down I shouldn't say it. So I said to her when she quit laughing, I said, doesn't that mean what I thought it meant? And she said, sure it does, but you're saying it like a whitey. So you see, you got to be careful. And to the Métis community, I'd like to say thank you for attending. We're still moving along slowly, moving ahead. And I think that we all have to stick together, and we all have to look after each other and remember how our ancestors worked and how successful they were because they worked together. Okay? So I raise my hands to all of you and say merci back.